Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Ajay. Today we will discuss how we can create a function. You remember in the very first initially when we started with Python, we discussed about the functions also, and I think in the somewhere in the mid of the training also we created some functions. Now I want you to again come back on this topic. Let's revise this and also see that how we can actually create something meaningful, something practical, because we are going to actually work with the Excel data. I want to create a function. We want to create a function which can copy the data from one Excel sheet and which can paste the data on the another sheet. Now, this is the data. This is the file we are using, EMEA data. You are already familiar with this file, right? As I have been repeatedly saying that in case if you find this file in your download section and you find that it's a bit of, it's a bit different, please go and remodify it. Obviously, you can do that because it's simple data. So now today I'm going to tell you uh, that now let's apply this function, and function is supposed to pick the entire data, and then this data, let's say, has to go here. So we will do this step by step. Obviously we will do this very slowly. Now you know that a function always requires a parameter, and a function has to have a name, isn't it? So what is the first thing that should come in my mind is that, okay, so what is the name I'm going to give to my function, right? All right, so I'm just going to give a name called, let's say, copy function, right? This is how you write, and then colon. The second thing, if you remember that, of course, I know you remember, we had discussed that in very detail. The second thing which we want to now understand is that, okay, so now what are the parameters? How many parameters I have to go and provide to this function? And this happens in every platform. Function always requires the parameters, whether it is Excel VBA or M code. If you have seen that ETL tool, Power Query M code, any even in SQL Server, where you learn the SQL, there also you can create the functions. The functions are everywhere, you know that. So, and they require the argument, the parameters. Now you can go with your own logic. I'm not saying that this is the solution, but I think what I will be looking here is that I will be looking here first of all the sheet name from where the data has to come. Like for example, this is the sheet called stats, isn't it? So maybe your Excel can have 10 sheets. So my purpose of creating a function is that so that I can reuse that function by simply just changing the values. That's why we use the functions, right? If you ask me, Ajay, what is the use of the function? I mean, can I just not simply go and copy the range and paste it in this sheet without creating the function? Yeah, you can do that. Of course, you can do that, right? But the benefit of the function is that you can reuse it. Now, how I can reuse it? Well, I'll let you know. Okay, let's first create the function. So, guys, we I'm thinking that we will go and provide the two parameter. One is the range, which is A1 to F7, and the second one is the sheet. All right. So this means that my function actually should have two parameters. So I'm just going to write here my range and sheet name. Okay, sheet name. So these are the two parameters. Now, obviously, you know that function is always supposed to be called uh, by by some outside member, because whatever we go and write inside this, that becomes the local object to this function. You have seen this in the previous lecture also. So obviously we have to go and create some demand for this function so that it can be called. And for that, I'm just going to write here var equals to, right? And then I'm going to call this function. This is how you call the function, isn't it? Now this is where we will go and write that, okay, so I'm looking for A1 to E20 or whatever, and the name of the sheet, which is in this case is, I think, stats 1. Okay, A1 to, let me check the range again. So it's actually A1 to F7, and the name of the sheet is stats, and the first initial is capital. Okay, so A1 to F7. Okay, A1 to F7. A1 to F7. There we go. All right. So yeah, that's how it is. Now, obviously, to check that if everything is going good, I'm just going to write here, first of all, that, okay, so what is my range? And then the sheet name. These parameters, I'm going to write it. Now, let's see that if the function is going to be called by this particular this line or not. And I know that it is going to be called, but just to cross check the things, let's go and run the code and let's see that. Let's go step by step, isn't it? Now you can see that a function is successfully called. Otherwise, we would have not seen these values A1 colon F7 and then stats1, which is a sheet name. So that means these parameters were able to take the value from this outside, the variable var, which actually, is giving these parameters. Wonderful. Now, what is the next thing we want to do, guys? Now, you see, so the plan is that we will simply go and run the loop, which will say that for each value in this range A1 to A1 colon F7. So I'm basically, my point is that I'm just going to write here for X in, and then I'm just going to write the value which is inside this A1 to A1 to F7, which is actually my range, like this. And then we will go and pick all the values one by one. But you know that before we do that, I mean, range is what? A1 to F7 is not actually a range right now, by the way. Right? It's not a range. I'm saying this because I'm trying to connect this with the Excel, right? From the Excel terms, from the Excel perspective, A1 colon F7 obviously is a range. But for this code, this interpreter, this is so far it's just a line. It is just a string, isn't it? So we have to convert this into a range. We have to go and set the range object, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to delete this line, or maybe I just keep this for you, okay? So you remember that how we did it step by step. You see, first of all, I'm just going to create a sheet, and how we create the sheet. So I just go and say that, okay, this is my sheet object, and this has to come from the WP, which is my workbook object, where this EMEA data.xlsx file, which is on my desktop, it is being opened from there, right? It gets opened from there actually. So you have already seen that how we define the sheets, isn't it? So WB and the sheet name. Now you see that the value which you have passed from this to this, obviously why we have passed this value, so that we can use inside the function, That's the reason we go and create these parameters. So once the sheet is defined, obviously sheet name has to be correct. It's very important. The next, I'm simply going to create range object, and then the range object would be the sheet, which is already defined in the above line. And now we will go and pick the my range, right? Are you getting the point, right? So this is how the hierarchy goes. So first you have a workbook, and then after the workbook is the parent object, and then on the next, the child object to workbook is worksheet, and then after worksheet, the next child of worksheet is range. Step by step we go and define the things. You can't reverse the things, that first you define the range and then on the second line you define the sheets. We had a word. We had already discussed these things, isn't it? Anyways, so now you see, so this actually becomes my range. And now I'm just going to write here print X, isn't it? Now you know that if I run this, I'm not going to get the range values, but I will get instead of that, I will start getting the cell locations. But in case if you don't remember, I'm just going to quickly run this and let's see that stats1 does not exist. Okay, I think it's stats actually. All right, so let me correct this. Let's run the code again. Okay, there we go. You remember this, right? So we are not going to actually get the values, but this is going to give us these on the cell locations A1, B1, C1, T1, all this. So obviously, to retrieve the values, we have to go and write one more loop over here. And so I'm just going to write here for by cell in this X, okay, which becomes actually the location. And now we will go and start writing by cell, and you must go and write here the value as well. Okay, so if I go and run this now, we should expect here all the values to be published. And as you can see here that you have got all the values over here. Okay, so this is how you see we are able to actually pick the values by creating a function. Now, as I said that, what is the benefit? You see, now anytime you can change this particular the range, anytime you can change the sheet, and accordingly, the data will be copied. Okay, you don't have to do any change inside this, because what matters is here is that this particular range matters. Again, I'm right. I'm using a range word, but actually it is not a range. I hope you got my point, right? But it is used as a range over here when this particular thing goes in my range parameter. So creating a function is always very kind of smart work, and especially in the cases where you are doing some complex task. Maybe you are doing a lot of things, you have a very big code, try to create a function, try to convert that into a function. Because now I can just if I can just go and change the reference of the workbook also at the same time, and I can just go and say that, okay, I just want to provide here the range and the sheet name, and rest everything goes according to the function.